Mackie thinks that objective values are just too mysterious. There aren't any. And because he thinks ordinary moral judgments include a claim to objectivity, he thinks that ordinary moral judgments are just wrong. Quoting from Mackie, the denial of objective values is an error theory. You can look that up in the glossary. This is just one example of an error theory in philosophy. A theory that, although most people in making moral judgments implicitly claim, among other things, to be pointing to something objectively prescriptive, these claims are all false. So according to Mackie, you ought not to stab your TA is false. That claim is false. It isn't true that you ought not to stab your TA. Okay, now I hasten to add, don't get any ideas, don't think that on Mackie's view, you ought to stab your TA is true, or even it's permissible for you to stab your TA is true. They're both false too. Here's an analogy, an error theory about bad luck. So here are some claims we make about bad luck. It's bad luck to have a black cat cross one's path. It's bad luck to break a mirror. Friday the 13th brings bad luck, and so on. These claims about bad luck are commonly believed and they're commonly asserted, but they're all false. The world doesn't work that way. Of course, some people are lucky and unlucky, have good fortune and bad fortune, but in the relevant sense, it is not bad luck to have a black cat across one's path. It's not bad luck to break a mirror. Nothing bad is going to happen simply because you break a mirror or because the date is Friday the 13th. So these claims that Friday the 13th brings bad luck and so on, they are all false. Of course, that doesn't mean that Friday the 13th brings good luck or it's good luck to break a mirror. Those claims are all false too. So in these respects, Mackie thinks moral claims are similar. Claims about what we ought and ought not to do, or claims about what morality permits us to do, are commonly believed and commonly asserted, but they're all false. The world just doesn't work that way. Now, Mackie has a number of arguments for this conclusion. One goes under the heading, the argument from queerness, which comes in two versions, a metaphysical version, which has two premises. If there were objective values, then they would be entities or qualities or relations of a very strange sort, utterly different from anything else in the universe. Second premise, there are no such strange entities. Conclusion, there are no objective values. That's the metaphysical version, and then there's an epistemological version. If we were aware of objective values, it would have to be by some special faculty of moral perception or intuition, utterly different from our ordinary ways of knowing everything else. So even if it's true, let's just grant for the moment that it's true, that you ought to save the drowning child, how on earth would we know that? We can just use our eyes to see that the child is drowning, but Mackie clearly thinks we can't just use our eyes to see that we ought to save the child. There's no such special faculty, according to the second premise, so we draw the conclusion, Mackie draws the conclusion, that we aren't aware of objective values. In other words, we do not have knowledge of objective values. It is very important to note that the conclusions of these two arguments, the first argument from queerness in its metaphysical guise and the second argument in its epistemological guise, are different. One is about whether objective values exist. The other is about whether we have knowledge of them. Mackie adds another argument which he does not think is as important as the argument from queerness, the argument from relativity. Quoting from Mackie, "The argument from relativity has as its premise the well-known variation in moral codes from one society to another and from one period to another, and also the differences in moral beliefs between different groups and classes within a complex community." Okay, exercise for you. Set out the argument from relativity in the form of premises and conclusion. It's perhaps worth taking some time to reflect on the truly mind-boggling and perhaps very alarming nature of Mackie's conclusion, that morality is one big fairy tale. Next time, we'll talk about Sharon Street's paper. As you'll see, Street is somewhat sympathetic to Mackie's overall line of argument, but goes in an interestingly different direction. And there's a quiz due on Friday on O'Neill and Mackie. And on Wednesday, I will post the second paper topics. See you then.